Welcome back to our channel, and thank you for joining us. We've got an exciting news story for you today, and we hope it captivates your attention. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Franklin Browning's flight landed at 2:17 p.m., a full 3 hours ahead of schedule. As he walked through the airport, his mind raced with thoughts of his breakthrough in sustainable water filtration, a development that could change not only his career but also the lives of millions lacking clean water. He hailed a taxi, barely noticing the driver's attempt to make conversation. Franklin's fingers drummed impatiently on his briefcase, which held the notes that could revolutionize his field. He was eager to share the news with Stella, who had supported him through all the long nights and missed dinners. Now he could finally prove it had all been worth it. The cab pulled up to their modest apartment building, and Franklin quickly paid the fare, grabbed his luggage, and rushed up the stairs 2 at a time. As he reached for his keys, he paused. Stella's voice carried through the door, low and intense. "I can't take it anymore. Anthony," she said. "Franklin's always working, and even when he's home, he's obsessed with his world-changing ideas. What about my dreams? My need for adventure?" Franklin's hand froze on the doorknob, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. Stella continued, her tone filled with bitterness. "You're right, Anthony. I deserve more, someone who can give me the life I want." Franklin leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. This couldn't be happening, not after everything they had been through together. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he unlocked the door and stepped inside. Stella spun around, her face pale. "Franklin, I didn't know you were home," she stammered, fumbling to end the call. "Clearly," Franklin replied, his voice calm despite the storm brewing inside him. He set his briefcase down with deliberate care. "We need to talk." Stella's eyes darted around the room, avoiding his gaze. "Talk about what?" "I was just on the phone with a friend," she said, her voice shaky. A friend. Franklin's tone was flat. "Does this friend have a name?" "Anthony." Perhaps. Stella stiffened. "You were eavesdropping," she accused. "I came home early to surprise you," Franklin said. "It seems I'm the one who got surprised." A tense silence filled the room, the air between them thick with tension. Then something shifted in Stella's expression. The fear in her eyes disappeared, replaced by cold anger. "Fine," she spat. "Yes, I was talking to Anthony. And you know what? I'm glad you heard. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not." Franklin fought to keep his voice even. "And what exactly isn't fine, Stella? I thought we were building a life together, working towards our goals." Stella let out a bitter laugh. "Our goals? You mean your goals? Your precious work always comes first. When was the last time you asked about my dreams?" Franklin, confused, tried to grasp her words. "I've always supported your dreams, Stella. I thought we were in this together." Stella's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "You're so naive, Franklin. While you've been off chasing your fantasy of saving the world, I've been suffocating. Anthony sees me for who I really am. He wants to give me the life I deserve." Franklin's jaw tightened. "The life you deserve? And what kind of life is that?" Exactly. Stella's eyes gleamed. "Adventure, excitement, passion, all the things you've forgotten about while you bury yourself in your work. Anthony is taking me to Bora Bora next month. When was the last time you even took me out to dinner?" Franklin felt as if he'd been physically struck. He thought of all the nights he had worked late, convinced it was for their future. Had he really been so blind? "So that's it?" he asked, his voice tight with pain and anger. "You're throwing away our marriage for a vacation?" Stella marched towards him, her face flushed with frustration. "It's not about the vacation, Franklin. It's about the life I deserve, one that Anthony can give me, and you can't." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "I want a divorce." Franklin stood still, his mind spinning as the world he knew crumbled around him. But beneath the shock and sorrow, something else emerged, a cold, hard determination. "A divorce," he repeated, his voice emotionless. "Is that really what you want, Stella?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "Yes." Franklin's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll have one. But don't think for a second that this ends here." He turned and walked into the bedroom, yanking open drawers and stuffing clothes into a suitcase. Stella followed, her bravado wavering. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Leaving," Franklin said curtly. "You've made your decision. Now live with it." He zipped the suitcase with more force than necessary. As he brushed past her, she grabbed his arm. "Franklin, wait. We need to discuss this about arrangements." He shook off her hand. "We'll talk through our lawyers. You wanted a divorce, Stella? Congratulations, you've got one." With that, he walked out, not looking back. The cool evening air hit his face as he stepped outside. He flagged down a cab and gave the address of a nearby hotel. As the city lights blurred past the window, Franklin's thoughts churned. The excitement of his breakthrough now felt like a distant memory. All he could think about was how fast everything had fallen apart. But beneath the chaos, a steely resolve began to form. Stella thought she could discard him so easily. She had no idea what was coming. Franklin Browning was not a man to be underestimated, and he would make sure she remembered that. The following weeks were a whirlwind of work and legal meetings. Franklin threw himself into his project with renewed determination, pouring his pain into his work. The water filtration system became his obsession, the one thing keeping him going. Meanwhile, Stella seemed bent on making the divorce as difficult as possible. Her demands were unreasonable, her attitude spiteful, but Franklin faced it all with a cold detachment that unsettled even his own lawyer. At the office, his colleagues noticed the change in him. The once easygoing researcher had been replaced by a man of unrelenting focus. No one dared slack off or question his methods except for Susan Chun, a longtime friend and fellow environmental engineer. She watched his transformation with growing concern. One evening, as the office emptied and Franklin remained hunched over his computer, she approached him gently. "Franklin," she said softly, "are you okay? You've been here day and night." He looked up, his eyes red but determined. "I'm fine, Susan," he replied. "I'm just focused on making this project work. It's all I have left." Susan hesitated for a moment before pulling up a chair. "You know that's not true. You have friends here, people who care about you." Franklin's face softened a little. "I appreciate that, Susan, I really do. But right now I need to focus on this. It's the only thing keeping me together." Susan nodded, empathy in her gaze, then straightened, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Well, in that case, I have some news that might interest you. There's a major company interested in our filtration system. They want to meet next week." For the first time in weeks, Franklin's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Really?" "Who Global Hospitality Group," Susan replied. "They're looking to implement eco-friendly systems in their resorts worldwide. If we can impress them, it could be huge for us." Franklin nodded, his thoughts already racing. "Then we need to make sure we blow them away." As Susan left, Franklin reflected on their friendship. She had been his rock through this ordeal, always offering support or a fresh perspective. For the first time since that life-changing night, he felt a flicker of hope. He turned back to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. Stella thought she had broken him. Anthony thought he had taken over Franklin's life. But neither of them knew what Franklin was truly capable of. This project wasn't just about clean water anymore. It had become a mission to show the world and himself that Franklin Browning was a force to be reckoned with. As the night deepened, he continued working, driven by determination and a hunger for redemption. While the city slept, Franklin was crafting a plan that wouldn't just change his life, it would change countless others. And when it was all said and done, those who underestimated him would realize the full extent of their mistake. 2 years had passed since that night when Franklin's world fell apart. The pain of betrayal had long since hardened into unshakable resolve. Now, standing in a sleek boardroom before a panel of executives from Global Hospitality Group, his patented water filtration system, once just an idea, was about to become a reality. Franklin scanned the room, noticing the eager expressions of those in attendance. He had rehearsed this presentation countless times with Susan. Every word, every slide was meticulously crafted for maximum impact. He wasn't about to let this opportunity slip through his fingers. "Gentlemen," Franklin began, his voice steady and confident, "what you're about to see will revolutionize water use in the hospitality industry." For the next hour, Franklin laid out his vision, speaking of sustainability, massive reductions in water waste, and the potential to bring clean water to drought-stricken areas. The executives leaned forward, clearly intrigued by what he was saying. As Franklin wrapped up, a heavy silence hung over the room. Then Gilbert Guerrero, CEO of Global Hospitality Group, began to applaud, soon followed by the other executives. "Mr. Browning," Gilbert said, rising to shake Franklin's hand, "that was impressive. Your system could truly change the way we handle water in our resorts worldwide." Franklin allowed himself a small, reserved smile. "Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I'm glad you see its potential." Gilbert nodded but then hesitated, his expression growing serious. "We're not just interested in licensing your technology, Mr. Browning. We want to buy your company outright." Franklin's pulse quickened. This was the moment he had worked toward for years. But he couldn't let his excitement show. "I'm open to discussing terms, Mr. Guerrero," Franklin replied carefully, "but I have one condition." Gilbert raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, and what might that be?" Franklin met his gaze steadily. "I want a controlling stake in your Bora Bora resort." The room went silent. Gilbert's eyes narrowed in confusion and interest. "That's an unusual request, Mr. Browning. May I ask why?" Franklin kept his composure, his voice calm and professional. Let's just say I have a personal interest in ensuring that property's success with our new technology. Gilbert studied Franklin for a long moment before nodding slowly. I see. Well, Mr. Browning, you've certainly piqued my curiosity. Why don't we discuss this further over dinner? I have a feeling there's more to this story. As the meeting ended, Franklin felt a surge of triumph. He was one step closer to his goal. Stella and Anthony thought they had left him behind, broken and defeated. They had no idea what was coming. Later that evening, over an extravagant dinner, Franklin outlined his vision for the Bora Bora resort. He described how it would become a model of sustainable luxury, setting the standard for the entire industry. Gilbert listened closely, clearly impressed by Franklin's knowledge and drive. "You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Browning," Gilbert said, shaking Franklin's hand at the end of the night. "But I think we can make this work. I'll have my legal team draft the paperwork. Welcome to Global Hospitality Group." Franklin allowed himself a genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I look forward to working together." As Franklin left the restaurant, he pulled out his phone and called Susan. "Well?" she asked, her voice tense with anticipation. "We did it," Franklin replied simply. "They're buying the company, and I'm getting Bora Bora Bora." Susan's joyful shout rang through the phone. "That's incredible, Franklin. I knew you could do it. We did it," Susan, Franklin corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." There was a brief silence on the other end. "So what happens now?" Susan asked. Franklin's tone hardened. "Now we prepare for phase 2. The next few weeks were consumed with intense negotiations and paperwork. Franklin threw himself into the work, perfecting every detail of the agreement. Finally, the day arrived. Standing in Gilbert's office, pen in hand, Franklin was ready to sign the final documents. "Mr. Browning," Gilbert said with admiration in his voice, "you've impressed me at every turn. Are you sure you won't reconsider joining our board of directors?" Franklin shook his head, smiling faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, but I prefer to be hands-on. I'll be heading to Bora Bora next week to oversee the implementation myself." Gilbert nodded, understanding. "Of course. I look forward to seeing the results." "Good luck, Mr. Browning." As Franklin signed his name with a flourish, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The pieces were finally coming together, and neither Stella nor Anthony had any clue about what was headed their way. The flight to Bora Bora was lengthy, but Franklin barely noticed as his thoughts were consumed by plans and strategies. As the plane landed, he took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been working toward for the past 2 years. Stepping off the aircraft, the warm tropical air wrapped around him. A man dressed in a sharp suit approached with an extended hand. "Mr. Browning, I'm Arthur McCarty, the resort manager. It's an honor to have you here." Franklin shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. McCarty. I'm eager to see the property." As they walked toward the waiting car, Arthur enthusiastically began describing the resort. "Your filtration system is already causing quite a stir in the industry, Mr. Browning. We've had other resorts reaching out to inquire about it." Franklin nodded absently, barely listening, as his eyes took in the surroundings, every detail locking into his mind. Somewhere on this island, Stella and Anthony were living out their fantasy life. A small, cold smile crept onto Franklin's face. Not for long. The resort was impressive, a sprawling complex of luxury bungalows and immaculate beaches. As Arthur led Franklin on a tour, he made mental notes, knowing he needed to familiarize himself with every inch of the property for his plan to succeed. As they passed the main bar, Franklin stopped abruptly. Behind the counter, a familiar face, Anthony Levine, was clumsily mixing drinks for a group of tourists. His appearance was much more disheveled than Franklin remembered. Their eyes met, and Anthony's face went pale, his hand fumbling with the bottle he held. "Is something wrong, Mr. Browning?" Arthur asked, noticing Franklin's sudden stillness. Franklin's voice was cool as he replied, "No, nothing at all. But I believe we should review the staff roster. I have concerns about quality control." Arthur appeared puzzled but nodded politely. "Of course, sir. We can arrange that whenever you'd like. Tomorrow will be fine," Franklin answered smoothly. "For now, I'd like to see my room. It's been a long flight." As they walked away, Franklin could feel Anthony's eyes fixed on his back. He allowed himself a satisfied smirk, let him squirm. Later that evening, Franklin sat in his lavish suite, sifting through the staff files Arthur had provided. Anthony's name was near the top, accompanied by a flimsy backstory about his bartending experience. Franklin snorted in amusement. It was almost too easy. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Arthur stood there, looking uneasy. "Mr. Browning, I hope I'm not intruding, but after our earlier discussion I did some digging. It seems there are some irregularities in a few employees' backgrounds, especially the bartender you pointed out." Franklin leaned back, his expression unreadable. Is that so? Tell me more, Mr. McCarty. Arthur shifted nervously. Well, sir, it appears Mr. Levine may have exaggerated his qualifications, and there are gaps in his employment history that don't add up. I see, Franklin replied slowly. And what would you recommend we do about this, Mr. McCarty? Arthur, now on more familiar ground, stood a bit straighter. Standard protocol would be to suspend him pending a full investigation. If the discrepancies are confirmed, termination would be the next step. Franklin nodded, a new idea forming in his mind. Let's hold off on that for now, Mr. McCarty. I suspect Mr. Levine might have some valuable information to share. Keep this quiet for the time being. I'll handle it personally. Arthur looked uncertain but nodded. Of course, Mr. Browning. Whatever you think is best. As Arthur left, Franklin turned to gaze out at the moonlit beach. Everything was falling into place. Anthony was stuck in a dead-end job, clearly struggling, which meant Stella couldn't be far behind. Franklin's lips curled into a cold smile. It was time to set the trap. The following evening, Franklin made his way to the resort's main restaurant. He chose a table with a clear view of the entrance, ordered an expensive bottle of wine, and settled in to wait. He didn't have to wait long. Just as his main course was served, she walked in. Stella. A wave of satisfaction surged through him. She looked worn out, her designer clothes from 2 years ago now appearing faded and worn. The vibrant, carefree woman who had left him was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate. When Stella spotted Franklin, her eyes widened in shock, but she quickly recovered, marching over to his table with fury written all over her face. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low but angry. Franklin leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Good evening, Stella. You're looking well." Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Don't play games with me, Franklin. What are you doing in Bora Bora?" Franklin took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. "Oh, didn't you hear? I own this place now, well, part of it anyway. Funny how things turn out, isn't it?" The color drained from Stella's face. "You what?" Before Franklin could respond, Anthony appeared at her side, puffing up his chest in an attempt to look threatening despite his bartender uniform. "Listen, man, you can't just..." Franklin cut him off sharply. "Actually, I can. Consider this your termination notice, effective immediately." Anthony's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, like a fish gasping for air. Stella's face twisted in rage. "You can't do this." She spat. "We'll fight you." Franklin stood, his voice low but firm. "This is what you both deserve. Get out now, or I'll have security throw you out." As if on cue, 2 large security guards appeared nearby, watching the situation closely. Stella dug her nails into Anthony's arm, dragging him away. "This isn't over, Franklin," she hissed. "You'll regret this." Franklin watched them leave, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Now, the real game could begin. As Franklin signaled for the check, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Susan. How did it go? A small smile crept onto Franklin's face as he typed his reply. Perfectly. They never saw it coming. Slipping the phone back into his pocket, he stepped out into the warm night air. The stars glittered above, and the sound of the ocean surrounded him. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment. For 2 years, he had worked tirelessly toward this point, rebuilding his life, creating a groundbreaking product, and positioning himself perfectly for revenge. But this was just the beginning. Stella and Anthony thought they could break him and walk away unscathed. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Franklin Browning was no longer the trusting, naive man they had betrayed. He was stronger now, hardened, and only getting started. As Franklin walked back to his suite, his mind buzzed with strategies. He had them exactly where he wanted them, desperate, angry, and ready to make reckless decisions. Now he simply had to wait for them to fall into his trap. The game was on, and Franklin was determined to win at all costs. The week after Franklin's dramatic encounter with Stella and Anthony was tense. The resort buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances. Franklin could feel the weight of countless eyes on him as he moved through the property, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. Stella and Anthony, meanwhile, weren't content to slink away in defeat. They launched a campaign of whispered rumors and outright lies, targeting both staff and guests. Their goal was clear: to undermine Franklin's authority and paint him as unstable and incapable of running the resort. "I heard he had a breakdown," Stella confided to a group of wealthy guests by the pool. "That's why he suddenly bought into this place. He's not in the right state of mind." Anthony, on the other hand, focused on the staff. He cornered a young housekeeper in a quiet hallway, speaking in an urgent tone. "Browning is going to ruin this place. He has no clue how to run a resort. We'll all be out of work in a month." The rumors spread like wildfire. Franklin could see the doubt in the eyes of the staff, the wary glances from the guests. He knew he had to act swiftly to regain control of the narrative. On Friday morning, Franklin called an all-staff meeting in the resort's largest conference room. As employees filed in, he stood at the front, projecting calm confidence. Once everyone was seated, he began, "Good morning, everyone. I know there have been some interesting rumors circulating this past week," he said with a slight smile. "I thought it was time we addressed them head-on." He paused, scanning the room. "Yes, I'm new to the hospitality business. Yes, I made my fortune in water filtration, and yes, I have a personal history with two individuals who were, until recently, employed here." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Franklin raised a hand to silence it. "But I'm not here to air dirty laundry or settle old scores. I'm here because I believe in the potential of this resort, and in each and every one of you." Franklin's tone grew more passionate as he laid out his vision for the resort's future. He spoke of sustainability initiatives that would set them apart from the competition, outlined plans to involve the local community, and emphasized making the resort a vital part of the area's economy. "I know change can be unsettling," he said, his voice softening. "But I'm not here to upend everything. I'm here to work alongside you to make this resort the best it can be. My door is always open if you have concerns, ideas, or just want to talk. Don't hesitate to come see me." As the meeting wrapped up, Franklin could sense a shift in the room. The skepticism was fading, replaced by cautious optimism. He had won the first battle, but he knew the war was far from over. Over the next few days, Franklin threw himself into the day-to-day operations of running the resort. He was everywhere, helping in the kitchen, assisting guests, even pitching in with groundskeeping. The staff watched in awe as their new boss, the man they'd been told was unstable and incompetent, demonstrated a solid understanding of every aspect of the business. Franklin also began implementing the eco-friendly practices he had promised. New, more efficient air conditioning systems were installed. Water-saving devices were fitted in every room. Solar panels appeared on rooftops. The results were immediate and impressive. Within a month, the resort's utility costs had dropped by 30%. Guests raved about the resort's commitment to sustainability, and bookings surged. Arthur McCarty, the resort manager, was stunned. "Mr. Browning," he said one evening, shaking his head in disbelief, "I've never seen anything like this. The staff morale is through the roof, the guests are happier than ever, and we're saving a fortune on operating costs." "How did you do it?" Franklin gave a modest smile. "It's simple, Arthur. I listened to the people who know this place best, you and your staff, and applied a bit of innovation. That's all." As news of the resort's turnaround spread, Franklin received a call from Gilbert Guerrero, the CEO. "Franklin, my boy," the CEO boomed, "you've outdone yourself. The board is thrilled. We're considering rolling out your methods across all our properties." Franklin's success was a bitter pill for Stella and Anthony. Their attempts to sabotage him had spectacularly backfired, leaving them more desperate than ever. Sitting in their cramped, run-down apartment, Stella's face was twisted in fury. "This can't be happening," she seethed. "That pathetic loser was supposed to fail, not turn into some hospitality genius." Anthony paced the small living room, his expression dark. "We need to do something more drastic, something he can't just talk his way out of." A malicious gleam appeared in Stella's eyes. "What about the resort's computer system? If we could mess with the reservations, cause some chaos." Anthony's face brightened with a grin. "I like the way you think, babe. I've got a buddy who's good with computers. Maybe he could help us out." What they didn't know was that Franklin had anticipated just such a move. He had worked closely with the IT department to set up an advanced honeypot, a trap designed to catch anyone attempting to hack the system. For 3 days, Stella and Anthony worked with their hacker friend, thinking they were wreaking havoc with the resort's bookings. They imagined the chaos: double-booked rooms, lost reservations, angry guests. Surely this would be the final blow to Franklin's success. On the 4th day, they gathered in their small apartment, eager to celebrate what they believed to be a victory. Stella poured cheap champagne into plastic cups, her eyes shining with malicious delight. "To the downfall of Franklin Browning," she toasted, raising her cup. Anthony clinked his cup against hers, grinning. "And to us, baby. We'll be running that place before you know it." Their celebration was abruptly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Anthony frowned, setting down his drink. Who the hell could that be? He opened the door to find 2 burly security guards from the resort, accompanied by a stern-faced police officer. "Stella Browning and Anthony Levine," the officer asked, his tone clipped and formal. Stella appeared behind Anthony, her face pale. "Yes, what is this about?" she asked nervously. The officer's expression remained stern. "You're under arrest for attempted cybercrimes against the Bora Bora luxury resort." As the weight of the situation sank in, Stella's composure shattered. She spun around to face Anthony, panic in her eyes. "You said this would work. You promised we'd get rid of him." Anthony could only shrug helplessly as the officer read them their rights, and the security guards moved in to handcuff them. As they were being led away, Stella caught sight of a familiar figure standing in the shadows: Franklin. He stood watching the scene unfold, his expression filled with grim satisfaction. In that moment, Stella realized the full extent of her mistake. She hadn't just underestimated Franklin, she had made a powerful enemy out of a man who had once loved her without reservation. The following week, as the sun began to dip over the crystal-clear waters of Bora Bora, Franklin stood on the beach, letting the warm sand sift between his toes. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of heartbreak, determination, and eventual triumph. Now, as he watched the sky turn a vibrant orange, a sense of peace washed over him. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "Penny for your thoughts." Franklin turned to see Susan Chun approaching, a warm smile on her face. He had invited her to Bora Bora to celebrate his success, and her presence felt like the final piece of a long and complicated puzzle falling into place. "I was just reflecting on how everything turned out," Franklin replied, returning her smile. "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" Susan nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It really is. Are you okay, though, with everything that's happened?" Franklin paused, taking a deep breath before answering. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. "You know, I think I really am. I thought I lost something important, but I ended up gaining so much more. My work is making a difference, and I've learned what real loyalty looks like." He turned to Susan, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Susan's smile widened. "That's what friends are for, Franklin. So what's next for Franklin Browning, resort owner and environmental pioneer?" Franklin chuckled, his mind already teeming with new possibilities. "I'm thinking expansion. There's a whole world out there that could benefit from what we're doing. And this time, nothing's going to hold me back." As they strolled along the beach, the resort glimmering in the background, Franklin felt a deep sense of closure. He hadn't just survived the betrayal, he had thrived in spite of it. For the first time in a long while, the future looked bright. They paused to watch the final sliver of sun sink below the horizon. Franklin turned to Susan, suddenly aware of how right it felt to have her by his side. "You know, Susan," he began, his voice soft but assured, "I've been thinking. We've made a great team, both professionally and personally. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Not as colleagues, but maybe something more." Susan's eyes lit up with a blend of surprise and joy, her expression bright. "I thought you'd never ask, Franklin. I'd love to." As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Franklin marveled at how his life had twisted and turned in unexpected ways. He had lost a wife but found a true partner. He had been betrayed but had risen above it stronger than ever. His work was now changing the world, and he had found someone who truly understood and supported his vision. Franklin realized that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted could lead you to what you truly needed. With Susan by his side and his innovative ideas making a global impact, he had finally discovered his true path to happiness and success. As they walked back toward the resort, the first stars twinkling in the night sky, Franklin felt a rush of excitement for what lay ahead. He had weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and now the future brimmed with endless possibilities. Whatever challenges awaited him, Franklin knew he was ready to face them not alone, but with someone who valued and believed in him. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead become the catalyst for his greatest triumph. Franklin Browning hadn't just survived, he had conquered, and the best was yet to come. This brings our story to a close. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click on the video on your screen, and I'll see you there.